Hey guys, welcome to the third episode of Shrink Tank Live. I'm Juliet Kuehnle,
Myque Harris.
and we are psychotherapists here at Southeast Psych in Charlotte, North Carolina. And on these episodes, every Friday, we tackle pop culture issues through the mental health lens. So we've picked a few topics that we want to talk about today with you guys. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's
yeah,
that? Oh,
yeah.
also, we want to just note that we know the biggest thing going on this week is the impeachment hearings. And we thought we could tackle that, but there's a lot of that out there already. So we actually kind of want to intentionally stay away from that and hit some other topics today.
I don't want to do it. I'm over it. So that's
just
my
can't.
opinion.
Just can't. So what are we going to talk about, Myque?
Yeah, so we have a few things that we're going to talk about, but just to let you guys know, we're both psychotherapists here. We have a specialization in young girls and women. Some of our specialty overlaps a little bit. Some of it differs a little bit. But we wanted to pick some topics that we're passionate about. So we're going to look at Kanye West and really his journey through spirituality and Christianity and how he's evolved and how he's really just out there kind of doing his thing.
With
and
his new
there's
album.
a lot of controversy. People are receiving it well. It's well received, but there's still, it's Kanye. Like Kanye just
That dude.
it comes with
Its own
just
stuff.
yeah, exactly.
Yep.
And then we're gonna get into a topic that I think we both feel passionate about, maybe for some different reasons, but also some similar reasons. So I'm a registered yoga teacher, RYT 200, and I have been practicing yoga for probably 11, 12 years now. And there is this article that is coming up, this documentary actually on Hulu that's talking about consent. And we thought it would be a really good conversation about not only consent in the yoga room, but consent around the holidays, consent with women and young girls. So we're really excited to have a conversation about that.
Yeah.
And then we're just going to get into these really good, feel-good movies that are happening for the holidays. Frozen 2, Mr. Rogers.
Yes.
Talk about some really cool things that we can do to kind of start off our Thanksgiving.
Yeah, so we'll end on a happy note.
Yes.
Okay, so Kanye. This man. All right.
Kanye.
I know. So he's got his new album called Jesus is King.
Yeah.
And I guess he's mostly been in the news recently for having gone into prisons to perform some of his songs. And then meeting with Joel Osteen or going to his huge church.
His big church.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
So what are your thoughts on like this evolution of his faith journey?
It's so interesting. I mean, Kanye is just a really interesting person to me. I mean, I think really like a psychotherapist, you can't help but look at the aspect and the layer of like mental health, right?
Sure.
And mental health and mental illness, right? Because I think they're two different things. And I think it's so interesting to see him really be in this space of, like, I was watching him in an interview and he has these really profound things that he says, right? And you're like,
Sure.
you nailed it. And then the next sentence, you're like,
what
oh,
was that?
what?
I know.
Oh my
I
gosh,
know.
you just cringe and you
I know.
ugh.
So
and
cringeworthy.
so like sometimes I think of Kanye as like that little kid where like their innocence hasn't been stolen and their artisticness hasn't been stolen in a sense, and you're like, oh wow, you just said something and it was so pure and whatever.
And he's just spouting
but
it all.
but as a 42-year-old man, sometimes you're like,
yeah.
so it's just weird.
Well, and it's hard to ignore the 42-year-old man of color too, and the things that he says that are just it's really hard to forget that.
Exactly.
And so I guess for me, I think it's wonderful that he's, if it's genuine, right? Like, I think that's sort of the question is there's this huge controversy of is it genuine? And who are we to judge someone else's faith journey or spiritual journey or whatever, right? So I think a lot of it's beautiful. I think it's great to go into prisons and perform. I think that's wonderful. But it's hard. Like, the Joel Osteen thing was just really hard for me to wrap my head around. I think about just, like, current evangelical support of Trump and this administration, and I cannot separate that from the history of their support of so much racial construct in our country, or racist construct in our country. I know that I'm not saying all Christians or all evangelicals are, of that same mindset, or even that, and I know it's a racist idea to say like all black people should not support Trump or whatever. So I'm very aware. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying with Kanye, because his MO and his shtick has always been to be controversial.
Yeah.
It's like hard to imagine. It's just, I'm skeptical.
Yeah, exactly. You're like, how genuine is it?
Yeah.
It's interesting because I found myself really thinking back to his mother and thinking about back to, wow, this foundation that he probably had, right? That he talks about having. and what his parents put into him, and that seed that was probably always there, that, as he talks about, is like overshadowed by ego and this and that and everything, and how, you know, maybe other things, whether it's his wife or his family, his children, are kind of bringing him back to that foundation. You know, I watched him on the stage with Joel Osteen, and honestly, like, I mean, there were some times where like you could tell, like, you know, Joel's like, he's a professional, okay, because he had his face together,
right,
and he, well, you know, but those cringe-worthy moments, but you know, it was really interesting because, you know, I felt this space of Kanye, you know, really kind of reconnecting, I think, with maybe some of that foundation for him, you know, and just saying, hey, you know, I'm coming back to this thing, this spiritual foundation that was really important, you know, and these other things that kind of pulled me away from it. It was interesting because his ego is still there, 100%. and it's almost this conflict. It's like an oxymoron, right? You're up there like talking about like Jesus is king, but
and
then but I'm gonna use like he even said something like, you know, like he said like God is using the greatest artist ever created to like speak his word, right?
So you're like, that's incongruent.
You're like you're like you're the greatest artist ever. I mean, okay, like some people think that, but
so that narcissism just permeates everything he
does,
it does, which is why it's so hard to tease that
so
apart.
It'll be really interesting to see if his spiritual journey breaks that down.
That'd be beautiful,
right? You know, because that's right. I mean, if you're talking about shrinking yourself, right, and putting God out there and making it bigger, then that's really what has to happen,
and truly spreading that word, not your own sort of agenda, right? That's the point.
So we'll see.
It's so interesting.
What
y'all,
happens?
Y'all have any questions about Kanye or that? We're good? Okay.
Yes, if you have questions, let us know. I will say that I went to a viewing, a screening of Jesus is King, and I really felt like it was a art piece. I mean, I felt like the video should have been placed on a museum wall. I mean, it just felt like the art, and you know, growing up in the Black church and that gospel music and just the space that it can take you, you know, to is really beautiful. And my daughter actually saw the viewing and she's like, Kanye wasn't even in it, and I'm like, actually he was in it in different scenes, but it's he's muted in a sense, so you're able to get something other than him, which I thought was really nice. It's
beautiful. Okay, so shall we shift to our second topic?
Yes.
All right. So let's talk about this. These articles that have come out recently, and this Hulu episode that's really around yoga and consent.
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, there is so Hulu has a series called The Weekly. They're individual kind of documentary style episodes, and they're all separate, different topics. And one is specifically called Hands On, and it talks about consent in the yoga room.
In that space.
And as a yoga teacher, this really resonated for me because I was like, oh my gosh, you know, like, we've been trained, right, to touch, to not touch, to adjust, to not adjust, all these different things.
It's all about the adjustment.
Yeah.
Just in case you guys aren't practicing yogis or whatever, it's about the adjustment. So sometimes you go to class and the teacher will come and see either that you're, you know, doing something that I guess could cause harm, right? That's in a, you know, you could go a little deeper or whatever, so they might come over and adjust you. And so the whole idea is, have they asked you if they could do that or not?
Absolutely. And I don't know if I can kind of put one of our producers on blast, but you know, he does yoga because real men do yoga. But talked about, you know, going to a class, being in child's pose, right, which is a common pose, where people are, you know, on the ground, knees wide, feet together. They're kind of laid out with their forehead, you know, towards the ground. And a common adjustment is for teachers to come and to place their hands on the lower back and really push so they can get deeper, you know, into that into the hip stretch. And I think that he said that his fiance heard him make the sound, oh, when the teacher is that correct?
Yeah.
When the teacher,
it was me. Spoiler alert, it was me. Yeah.
You know, when the teacher made that adjustment, right?
Sure, and you didn't know it was coming.
Exactly. And so it was even more striking for me, like, hearing that story from a male, right? And saying, like, you know, right, like, consent, we're not just talking about, you know, male teachers with female, you know, students. We're talking about everyone.
Right.
And go ahead.
No, I yoga is about surrendering, right? I think, and so it's like, as I'm listening to these episodes and reading these articles and really just thinking, when you walk into that space, that's the vibe, is surrender and letting go and trust. And so it makes so much sense that you would kind of just go along with it. And then all of a sudden you're like, well, wait, like that didn't. And so I think it speaks to, so this all came out of, like, since the Me Too movement started is why all of this really came to light, that every space can be impacted by non-consensual touch or just inappropriate boundaries, and how as women and as men, but we are just we learn to kind of like rationalize it, or like, well, they're the teacher. I guess I must have needed that, or this is about surrendering. So let me let it go, and let me not be so uptight,
and that's what a lot of the women were talking about, right? Going to these master classes and, you know, getting instruction from really famous kind of celebrity gurus, yoga teachers, and, you know, literally having in the documentary, they're showing, you know, a seminar where a teacher is literally saying, okay, put your legs up now, spread them wide. Now I'm going to wrap them around me, and I'm going to like put my hands reaching over your crotch and onto your waist, and you know, and I think they referred to that as like the diaper change, and how I felt very uncomfortable watching it. I do not adjust in classes because I don't know if I will trigger someone's trauma.
That's the thing. Right? Everybody's boundary is different.
And
sometimes you don't know it until you're even, you know, and then it's like, oh, and that doesn't feel comfortable or what. And I think with that example, I mean, some teachers walk you through it. Right. Some teachers don't. They just come and do it. Exactly. Which can feel very violating.
And, you know, we're mothers, and so we're really talking about, you know, these things not as women, but also thinking about raising young women and putting them out into the world and really equipping them, you know, and getting them to a really healthy space where they can feel empowered and they can feel like, you know, I can say no, because the interesting thing about consent, especially in a yoga room or other places, you know, you can, as a yoga teacher, say, can I put my hands on you? And somebody says, yes. And they're screaming inside. They're screaming inside, no, don't touch me, you know, absolutely not. And so it's just a really fine line that I think we need to be having more conversation about.
Absolutely.
And when it comes to our girls, like the holidays are coming up, right? So, hey,
Aunt so-and-so is here. Yes. Give her a hug. Come give me a kiss. You don't have to do that. Exactly. I have always been very intentional about this with my girls. Like from early, it was if we're tickling, we're having a tickle fight. If you say stop, we stop. Yes. And I have been very adamant about that to anybody that, like, if you're gonna tickle my kid, if they say stop, or ask first. Do you want to tickle? Yes. And we've talked about the word consent from very early on, defining that.
Right. We, in our house, we have a saying where we say, stop means stop.
Yes.
And my daughter has used it on me, right? Where I'm just like saying something, joking, or like, you know, tickling or whatever. And it's like, no, Mom, stop means stop. And that is the line, right? And so I think really those conversations, to be able at young ages to say you are allowed, permission. You know, give them permission is so important.
And I think with the yoga thing, any spaces, if you feel uncomfortable, that's it. Right. There doesn't need to be any other rationalization or reasoning. If you feel uncomfortable, listen to that. Exactly. And that's a message that I feel like all children, not just girls, like everybody should carry with them.
I think it would be so interesting to hear from you guys, like where are some areas that you think consent needs to be considered, right? Like a lot of people weren't thinking about the yoga space, but it's a place where consent needs to be considered. So where are some other places where, you know, we really need to be thinking about where it's important for people to have consent? So share with us, we'd like to know.
Yeah,
absolutely. Can you think of some other spaces that we need to be thinking about to empower?
The thing that came to mind is how I also read articles about people think that that's an overreaction. And so it's valid if you feel like, gosh, we're getting so sensitive to that. I think that's an important part of the conversation too, to be able to, you know, because for us as clinicians who have clients who have experienced trauma, or us ourselves who have been part of the Me Too movement, and it just makes sense. But there are a lot of people out there who kind of don't get it, and it just seems like, why do you need to be so hyper aware of it? Exactly. We could talk about that for a long time. But that's what came to mind, is just to be able to introduce that into the conversation.
Absolutely. I think I would really hope that there can be healthy, trusting conversation without the existence of false harmony, right?
Yeah.
Like feeling like, you know, I have to just kind of laugh this off and make like it's okay, and you know, that kind of thing.
And just internalize it and carry it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I will say, kind of last point, as an eating disorder therapist, there are yoga studios in town that we know are going to be more geared towards like either body positivity language or things that we know wouldn't necessarily be as triggering for people in that realm. So I also think as we think about this, and it's conversations I hope studios are having too about how do we maybe introduce some consent. And they talked about that in the video of like, do we have cards where there's an X on one side and the person flips it over if they don't want to be touched? Do we do it in the beginning when everyone's eyes are closed so that people don't feel like they're on blast, you know, raising their hand or whatever? So I just think it can also be a studio by studio, an instructor by instructor kind of thing. And so I hope that people start talking about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think the awareness of people's trauma and what their triggers are, you know, are really important. Yeah. So what about like, you know, the grocery store? Is there I'm just trying to think of like
yo, you run up and touch me in the grocery store, it's on.
You know, like, I'm like,
Juliet's
what
swinging
about
fists.
Like, why?
I don't know.
Just put my groceries in the bag. No, I know. Well, anywhere, right? I guess the point is
it's a random place.
Anywhere. I
anywhere.
just I think it's that and to not be offended, going back to the family thing, right? To not be offended and make it about you. If the kid is like, I don't want to hug you, or I don't want to kiss you, or whatever, like to understand the context of that, like that is their decision. Period.
I was thinking about my hair, like I'm always changing my hair and you know, coming to work and someone's like, can I touch your braids? And I'm like, did you did just ask me that, and it was fine, but I kind of like even, you know, I was like, oh, this is still happening. Like, it's still happening, and it was fine, and they asked, and it was, you know, but it was still kind of that moment where like,
did you feel like you could say no?
I did feel like I could say no.
There you go.
You go, girl.
Thank you very much.
How would you recommend parents or family members respond to kids that say, I'm not comfortable with a hug? Like, because I feel like for some people that haven't experienced that, haven't had someone that approaches that or establishes that boundary with them, they could probably like take offense to it. So So how would you recommend that, you know, they try to shift their mindset for something like that as a parent or a family member?
I have sent articles about it to certain family members, just as someone, but also at the end of the day, that's your feelings. You know, I'm here for my kid. So you go deal with that if that offends you. But I have the conversation for me is more with my kids. Like if they keep pushing, or you know, you come to me, or you know, here's what you can say. But because especially it's a generational thing too. I think too. Like a lot of like, you know, our parents and grandparents are like, what's the big deal? You kiss me when you say bye.
I had a conversation like that last year in our household, and we were just talking about. I will answer the question, but just talking about you know, hey, you know, hug this family member, hug this friend, you know, and someone. And my family said, well, you know, it's they're the good friend. They're like family, right? Like it's just the way they greet and say goodbye and kind of defending it. And I was like, that's I don't agree with that. Yeah, I don't agree with that. But I think to answer the question, I think that a lot of those situations are we have to deal with them in the moment, right? We really have to be able to in the moment nurture our child, but to be able to address that adult, you know, and say, you know, we're just trying to, you know, give them permission to say no, and you know, and have some way of making that adult feel comfortable, but at the same time being able to make a really clear boundary in that moment to say, you know, we just want to let them know that they have a choice. They can hug people or not hug people.
Yeah,
it's not
and
anything personal.
It's as simple as that.
Yeah,
you don't have
exactly,
to
and kind of move on from it. And then if there's another conversation after the fact that needs to be had, then I think you can do that. So really, as the holidays come, just try to promote this space of you know, giving your kids permission to hug or not hug. And it's not just adults, right? Kids on kids, right?
Totally,
like, you know, so you have that 4-year-old that likes to hold on, you know, to the 6-year-old way too long and squeeze too hard, and just saying like, hey, you know, you can say no, you know.
That's right.
That kind of thing. So it's important.
Just empowering them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are moms. And we have daughters. And I will say that my daughter is about to be 9 in a couple of weeks. And when she was younger, 3-4 years old, Frozen was all the rage, and she dressed up as Elsa when she was 3.
Of course.
And she was amazing. My little brown Elsa. And so we're actually very excited that Frozen 2 is coming back around. I loved the first Frozen and how it ended in this way that was so different, you know?
It was not about the man.
It was not about the man.
Sister love.
And so I've heard some good things about, you know, Frozen.
Yeah.
And so we already have our tickets. We pre-ordered. We're going today.
Yes.
5:10.
Oh my gosh. Okay, great. My oldest is going tomorrow, but I don't have plans yet to see it. Okay. I actually don't know anything about the storyline at all.
Yeah, I don't know.
But
I don't want to know.
No, exactly. That's how I feel.
Yeah.
But it's Frozen fever. So I'm all in. And there's a lot of pressure on this music. The music better be good.
Yeah.
Because that soundtrack is so good. So we're excited about that.
Yes. So I'm wondering like where they are going to go, because they said it was better and it's better than the first one, and like, where can the storyline take them? And I think that they kind of go back in time, because I think the mom is there, and their story so more about like their relationship too with the mom. So I think that will be cool to see, like, as moms and daughters, you know.
So there should be some good psychological stuff we can discuss after that.
Exactly. Family of origin stuff.
That's right. Okay, I love it. Okay, awesome.
Will be good. And then so what else is happening?
They're good movies. So Tom Hanks.
Yes, Tom Hanks.
Mr. Rogers. Which did you hear, by the way, that they're related?
Yes.
That
exactly.
is
6 cousins.
Crazy.
Right? 6 cousins.
Yeah, I'm like, of course they are, and they're adorable little cardigans, and they look like little twins. I know.
I love Tom Hanks.
I love Tom Hanks and Mr. Rogers. Did you grow up watching Mr. Rogers?
I did.
Okay, yes. And then Daniel Tiger.
And Daniel Tiger.
Oh. Don't get me started on all the Daniel Tiger ditties.
I love Daniel Tiger.
I feel like Daniel Tiger helped raise my children, so love Mr. Rogers.
Yes.
But anyway, so that just came out, I think, yesterday. Mm-hmm. And did you see the documentary?
I did not.
I didn't
I
either,
saw
and
bits and pieces of it because we watched it at work, and I saw bits and pieces of it, and just I feel like, you know, when I think of Mr. Rogers, I think of like this person who represents like the core of really who we are in terms of like niceness and joy, and he was able to really like exemplify that day after day, week after week, year after year, and I admire that, like I admire this space to be able to go into and really connect with people and say like, I see you and I love you and I'm gonna do the work intentionally like every day to do that. So,
and I read that he every morning when he woke up, he had kind of an exercise routine, and then he would pray for people by name. Wow. Like, and I think that just speaks to like his intentionality.
I love that.
I love that too. And you know, because I don't remember exactly how long he was on, but there are, you know, episodes where, you know, in times of segregation where he had a black man sitting with him, like I think they had their feet in the same water or something.
Yeah, I mean, exactly.
Powerful.
Yeah. Because they were talking about the pool. It was I remember seeing that. They were talking about the pool and black and white people not being able to, you know, be together. And here we are.
Myque.
That is our like that's like our little special name.
Oh my gosh. So we kind of thought that maybe in wrapping up the session, so one thing that Fred Rogers used to do, and I think the most distinct place that he did it was when he accepted his Emmy Award. So in front of all of those famous people, when, you know, you get up and give your speech, he asked that everyone pause for 10 seconds to just kind of think about and remember the people that helped them become who they are. And so it of course, like, people kind of broke out in this like nervous giggling, and nobody likes awkward silences. But again, to his intentionality and thinking about the roots of like mindfulness and how he was doing that. Yeah. And so it started in nervous giggles and then kind of went quiet, and then people were emotional.
Yeah. I think there's something about allowing yourself to just settle in silence and being okay with just being where you are and accepting that without judgment and just sitting in it. And it does make us uncomfortable at first, but when you get into it, it can be really beautiful, you know. So I love that you're introducing that, and it can be thinking about a person who influenced you, like you said, or just thinking about the things that you're grateful for in this moment, or what you're looking forward to, or whatever it is. So do you want to walk us into that?
Sure.
That'd be so beautiful.
So just to take some seconds, and I think as therapists we talk a lot about gratitude practice, right? And the research behind having that mindset and instilling a practice daily, ideally, right? So I do like the specificity of being grateful for people who shaped you. So maybe that's kind of our intention today.
Yeah.
So let's just take a couple moments of silence and just think about whoever comes to mind, somebody who's influenced you or impacted you, and just sit with that and maybe send a little silent message of gratitude to that person or for that person.
Yeah. Should we start with like a cleansing breath?
Do it.
Let's do it.
Yeah.